The videographer called me on a Thursday evening. 6 weeks after my daughter's wedding. I was in the kitchen making coffee. The phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Mr. Harmon. This is Jesse Caldwell. I was the videographer at your daughter's wedding. Of course. Jesse, how are you? Mr. Harmon, I need to talk to you about something. I've been editing the footage, the highlight reel, the ceremony cut, the reception package. And I found something in the video that I don't think you were supposed to see. What do you mean? I have a camera that runs continuously during the reception. Wide angle. Mounted in the corner of the venue. It captures everything, not just the dance floor and the toasts, but the background, the hallways, the coat room, the parking lot through the window. Most of it is useless. People walking, staff clearing plates. But at the 2-hour 47-minute mark, the camera picks up 2 people in the hallway behind the reception hall. They don't know they're on camera. One of them is your new son-in-law. The other is your wife. My coffee went cold in my hand. Mr. Harmon, they're not just talking. I'm sorry. I think you need to see this. I don't feel right delivering the wedding package to your daughter without telling you what's in the background footage. I've been doing this job for 11 years. I've never had to make a call like this. Send me the footage. Are you sure? Send it tonight. He sent it. I watched it at 11 p.m. alone in the kitchen on a laptop screen. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of hallway footage that ended my marriage, destroyed my daughters, and proved that the man who'd stood at the altar and said, "I do," had been sleeping with my wife for 2 years. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. If that phone call already made your stomach drop, take a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It truly helps this channel reach more people. And a gentle reminder, while this story carries real emotions and real lessons, some names, details, and events have been fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. Stay with me. Because the hallway footage was just the surface. What I found when I started digging was worse than anything a camera could capture. My name is Arthur Harmon. I'm 61 years old. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a civil engineer. 35 years designing stormwater management systems for municipal governments across the Triangle. Not glamorous work. The kind of work that happens underground, in pipes and culverts and retention basins, so that when it rains, the streets don't flood and the houses don't wash away. I've spent my career making sure the invisible systems work. I'm about to tell you a story about the invisible systems in my own life that I never thought to check. My wife's name is Diane. We married in 1991. 33 years. She was a pharmaceutical sales representative for most of our marriage, working for Bristol, Myers Squibb, then AstraZeneca, then a smaller specialty firm called Meridian Therapeutics that focused on oncology products. She earned well, $140,000 a year at her peak, with bonuses and stock options that pushed her total compensation to $180,000. She was smart, polished, the kind of woman who could walk into a room of oncologists and command their attention. Not because she was loud, but because she was precise. She knew the data. She knew the clinical trials. She knew the difference between a phase 7 and phase 3 study the way I knew the difference between a 24-inch and a 36-inch culvert. We had one daughter, Emma, born 1995. Emma is the center of everything good in my life. She became a pediatric occupational therapist. She works with children who have sensory processing disorders and developmental delays. She is kind in a way that isn't taught but inherited. From Diane, I always assumed. From the version of Diane I thought I knew. Emma met Graham Whitfield in 2021. Graham was 33, a financial analyst at a wealth management firm in Raleigh. He wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He drove an Audi A6. He had the particular confidence of a man who manages other people's money and believes that proximity to wealth is the same thing as possessing it. I didn't like Graham. Not from instinct, from observation. The same skill set that lets me read a topographic map and predict where water will flow let me read Graham Whitfield and predict where trouble would follow. He was too smooth, too prepared, too eager to impress me in ways that felt rehearsed rather than genuine. There's something off about him. I told Diane after Graham's 3rd visit to our house. You say that about everyone Emma dates. I said it about two people. I was right about both. Graham is different. He's stable. He has a career. He treats Emma well. He treats Emma like an audience. That's different from treating her well. Diane dismissed my concerns. She more than dismissed them, she advocated for Graham, actively. She invited him to family dinners when Emma hadn't. She suggested weekend trips where Graham would join us. She pushed for the engagement when Emma was still considering whether to move in together. I understand now why Diane was pushing. At the time, I thought she was being a supportive mother who wanted her daughter to be happy. She wasn't. She was keeping Graham close for reasons that had nothing to do with Emma. Emma and Graham got engaged in June 2024. The proposal was at a restaurant in downtown Raleigh, a 300A plate place called Pool's Diner, which is actually an upscale establishment despite the name, housed in a 1945-era diner building on South McDowell Street. Graham proposed with a 1-carat oval diamond set in platinum. The ring cost $28,000. I know this because Graham told me unprompted, the way men who measure love in dollars announce the price of their gestures. The wedding was on September 21, 2024. The venue was the Bradford, a historic event space in New Hill, North Carolina, about 30 minutes southwest of Raleigh, 180 guests, a ceremony in the garden, a reception in the main hall, a 5-tier cake that cost $4,200, a live band that cost $8,500, a photographer who cost $6,000, and a videographer, Jesse Caldwell of Caldwell Cinema, who cost $4,100 for a full-day package that included ceremony coverage, reception coverage, a highlight reel, and one continuously running background camera. The total cost of the wedding at $87,000. I paid $62,000 of it. Graham's family paid $25,000. Diane had offered to contribute from her Meridian Therapeutics bonus. I'd said no, the father of the bride pays. That's tradition. That's what I was raised to believe. I paid $62,000 to host a wedding where my son-in-law disappeared into a hallway with my wife at the 2-hour 47-minute mark. Jesse Caldwell's background camera was a Sony FX3, a full-frame cinema camera that records in 4K resolution at up to 120 frames per second. Jesse mounted it on a tripod in the southeast corner of the reception hall, set to wide angle with a 16-35-180 lens, and let it run for the duration of the reception. The camera captured approximately 4 hours and 20 minutes of continuous footage, 260 minutes of ambient recording that Jesse would later review for candid moments, background reactions, and supplemental footage for the final edit. The footage at 2470 Odridge showed the hallway behind the reception hall. The hallway led to the restrooms, the coat check area, and a side exit to the parking lot. At 24:7:12, Graham entered the hallway from the reception. At 24:70:38, Diane entered from the same direction. They met at the end of the hallway, near the side exit. The camera was 40 feet away, shooting through an open doorway. The angle was oblique. You could see them, but they couldn't see the camera. They didn't know they were being recorded. What happened in the next 2 minutes and 14 seconds was not ambiguous. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not a friendly conversation captured from an unfortunate angle. My wife and my son-in-law were in physical contact that left no room for interpretation. His hands on her waist, her hands on his face, a kiss that lasted 11 seconds, and a whispered exchange that the camera's built-in microphone, a Sony digital mic with a pickup range of approximately 15 feet, partially captured. The audio was faint. Jesse had enhanced it using Adobe Audition, professional audio editing software used in film post-production, isolating the vocal frequencies and reducing the ambient noise from the reception hall. The enhanced audio produced fragments. Not complete sentences. Fragments. Graham's voice. Can't keep doing this here. Diane's voice. After tonight. Different. Graham's voice. 2 years is long enough. Diane's voice. He doesn't know. 2 years. He doesn't know. I watched the footage 3 times. Each time I noticed something new. The first viewing shock. I saw the kiss and my brain short-circuited the way a breaker trips when the current exceeds the capacity. The second viewing details. The familiarity of their body language. The way Graham's hand found Diane's waist without searching. The way Diane tilted her head at the exact angle that comes from practice, not spontaneity. The third viewing the timeline. 2 years. Graham and Emma had been together for 3 years. The affair had started 1 year into their relationship. My son, In-law had been sleeping with my wife for 2 of the 3 years he'd been dating my daughter. He'd proposed to Emma while sleeping with her mother. He'd stood at the altar and said vows to my daughter while carrying on an affair with the woman sitting in the front row. And Diane, my wife of 33 years, had watched her daughter walk down the aisle knowing that the groom had been in her bed the night before. I know that because of what I found next. After watching the footage, I didn't confront Diane. Not immediately. I did what I do professionally. I investigated the infrastructure. The invisible system. The underground network that nobody checks until something floods. I started with the phone records. Our family plan was through Verizon, a shared account that I managed, which meant I had access to the itemized call and text logs through the Verizon My Account portal. I pulled the records for Diane's line going back 24 months, the period that Graham's whispered, 2 years, indicated. The records showed a pattern. Diane and Graham had been communicating by phone and text with a frequency that was invisible in daily life but devastating in aggregate. An average of 4-7 text messages per day, 2-3 phone calls per week, averaging 12 minutes each. The calls were clustered between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Diane's workday hours, when she was on the road visiting medical offices, and I was at my engineering firm. The texts peaked on weekdays and dropped on weekends. The pattern of an affair conducted during business hours and suppressed during family time. I didn't read the texts. Verizon's itemized records show timestamps, phone numbers, and message counts, but not message content. To read the texts, I would have needed access to Diane's phone, which was always with her, always locked, always face down on the nightstand at night. I'd never thought anything of the face down phone. Now I understood it. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Karen Boyle, a retired Raleigh Police Department detective who'd spent 15 years in the domestic and financial crimes unit before starting her own firm. Karen charged $125 an hour. She was worth every cent. Karen's investigation took 3 weeks. She used the phone records as a starting point and built outward. The same way I'd build a stormwater drainage map, starting at the discharge point and tracing backward to the source. Karen discovered that Graham and Diane had been meeting at a hotel in Cary, North Carolina, the Umstead Hotel and Spa, a luxury property on Woodland Pond Lane that charges $450 per night for a standard room. The meetings occurred on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, the days Diane's pharmaceutical sales route took her through Cary, the days she'd always described as busy and exhausting. Karen obtained the hotel records through a legal subpoena issued by my divorce attorney, a man named Paul Lindsay at a family law firm in Raleigh. The subpoena was authorized under North Carolina Rule of Civil Procedure 45, which allows discovery of relevant evidence in pending civil actions. My divorce petition had been filed 3 days after I watched the footage. The hotel records showed 47 visits over 22 months, every Tuesday or Thursday, sometimes both. $40.50 per night, charged to a credit card in Graham's name, not his personal card, but a corporate American Express card issued by his wealth management firm. Graham had been expensing his affair with my wife as business travel, 47 hotel visits, 22 months, the $2,150 in room charges billed to his employer, the arithmetic of betrayal, documented in hotel receipts and corporate credit card statements. Karen also discovered something I hadn't anticipated. Graham and Diane had a joint bank account. Not at our family bank, at a separate institution, a small credit union in Durham called the Local Government Federal Credit Union. The account had been opened in March 2023, 1 year into the affair. It contained 34,000 deposited in increments of $500 to $2,000, always in cash, always at ATMs to avoid teller interaction. The account was in both their names, Deanne M. Harmon and Graham T. Whitfield, a joint bank account. My wife and my son-in-law had a joint bank account, the kind of account that couples open, the kind that requires both parties to present identification and sign signature cards. They'd walked into a credit union together, sat across from a banker together, and opened an account together, a financial partnership that paralleled the marital partnership they were both betraying. The $34,000 was, according to Karen's analysis, the beginning of a relocation fund. Text metadata that Karen obtained through the subpoena process showed that Graham and Diane had been searching for apartments in Charlotte. specifically in the South Park and Dilworth neighborhoods, areas where two-bedroom apartments rent for $2,800 to $3,500 per month. They were planning to leave both of them. Graham would leave Emma. Diane would leave me, and they'd move to Charlotte together. They were going to do this after the wedding. After I paid $62,000 to host a reception where they kissed in a hallway. After Emma walked down the aisle in a dress that cost $8,500 to the man who was sleeping with her mother. After the cake. After the photographs that would sit in albums nobody would ever want to open again. The wedding was the farewell tour. The last performance before the exit. I shared the footage with Emma on a Sunday afternoon. 3 weeks after the videographer's call. I'd spent those 3 weeks gathering evidence, consulting my attorney, and preparing for a conversation that I knew would break my daughter in ways that no father can protect against. I drove to Emma's apartment in North Hills, the apartment she shared with Graham, the apartment she'd decorated with wedding photographs that were already 6 weeks old and already lies. I asked Graham to leave. He asked why. I said, "Because I'm going to show Emma something, and you're not going to want to be in the room." Graham's face changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. The way a building shifts on its foundation before it collapses. The cracks appear at the stress points first. His eyes moved to the laptop bag I was carrying. He knew. Not what I had specifically, but he knew that the infrastructure of his double life had failed somewhere, and that the failure was in that bag. He left. He said, "I'll be at the office." He didn't ask what I was showing Emma. He already knew that the question would confirm whatever he was afraid of. He left the apartment the way a man leaves a building he knows is about to be condemned, quickly, without looking back, taking nothing. I sat Emma down at the kitchen table. I opened the laptop. I told her about Jesse's call. I told her about the background camera. I told her that what she was about to see would be the hardest 2 minutes and 14 seconds of her life, and that I would be sitting right beside her for every one of them. She watched the footage. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She watched it once, from beginning to end, and then she closed the laptop with both hands slowly, carefully, the way you close a casket. "How long?" she asked. 2 years. Based on the phone records and the hotel records. Hotel records. I showed her Karen's report, the 47 visits to the Umstead, the corporate credit card charges, the joint bank account in Durham, the apartment searches in Charlotte, everything. The entire underground system, mapped and documented the way I'd map a drainage basin, every tributary, every channel, every point where the water had been flowing while nobody was watching. Emma read the report for 40 minutes. She didn't cry during the reading. She cried afterward, quietly, continuously, the way water seeps through soil when the ground is saturated. Not a flood, a saturation. Grief that fills every available space until there's no room for anything else. Mom knew I was walking down the aisle to a man who was sleeping with her. Yes. She helped me pick out the dress. She was with me at the fitting. She held my veil. She stood in the mirror behind me and said, "You look like everything I ever wanted for you." While she was, "Yes. Dad, I can't. I know. What followed was the systematic dismantling of 2 marriages. Not 1, 2. I filed for divorce from Diane on October 28, 2024. The grounds adultery, which, in North Carolina, remains a valid ground for divorce under NCGS 57, despite the state's adoption of no-fault divorce provisions. North Carolina is one of only a handful of states that still recognizes fault-based grounds, and adultery can affect equitable distribution of marital assets under NCGS 5020. More importantly, North Carolina is one of 6 states that still recognizes the tort of alienation of affection, a civil cause of action that allows a spouse to sue a third party who interfered with the marital relationship. Under North Carolina General Statute 5213, a spouse can bring a civil lawsuit against the person who alienated the other spouse's affection, seeking compensatory and punitive damages. The tort is controversial. Critics argue it's an antiquated relic of a time when women were considered property. Supporters argue it provides accountability for people who knowingly destroy marriages. North Carolina courts have upheld the tort repeatedly, including a 2010 case where a jury awarded $9 million in an alienation of affection suit, one of the largest such verdicts in American history. My attorney, Paul Lindsay, filed 2 actions simultaneously. First, the divorce petition against Diane, citing adultery, with a request for an unequal distribution of marital assets under the Equitable Distribution Statute. Second, an alienation of affection suit against Graham Whitfield, seeking compensatory and punitive damages for his role in destroying my 33-year marriage. Emma filed for annulment from Graham on the same day. Her grounds: fraud, specifically that Graham had entered the marriage while engaged in an ongoing sexual relationship with her mother, a fact he'd concealed throughout the courtship and engagement. Under North Carolina law, a marriage can be annulled if one party was induced to marry through fraud that goes to the essentials of the marriage, NCGS 51-3. Graham's concealment of a tear affair with Emma's mother was, by any measure, a fraud that went to the essentials. Graham hired an attorney, a litigator from a firm in Charlotte, expensive, aggressive, the kind of lawyer who bills $500 an hour and earns it by making the other side's life miserable. The attorney's first move was to file a motion to dismiss the alienation of affection suit, arguing that the tort was unconstitutional. The motion was denied. North Carolina courts have rejected constitutional challenges to the alienation of affection tort consistently for over 20 years. Diane hired her own attorney. She didn't deny the affair. The evidence was too comprehensive to deny. The hotel records, the joint bank account, the videographer's footage. She instead argued that the marriage had been emotionally deteriorated for years and that the affair was a symptom, not a cause. Paul Lindsay dismantled this argument in discovery. He subpoenaed Diane's personal journal, a leather-bound notebook she'd kept since 2018. The journal contained entries about Graham that predated the affair by 6 months. Diane had written about Graham the first time she met him, at a dinner with Emma in October 2021. Emma's new boyfriend came to dinner. Graham, he's charming, confident. He looked at me across the table and I felt something I haven't felt in years. Arthur is a good man. But Arthur is a pipe and a culvert and a drainage report. Graham is something else. A pipe and a culvert and a drainage report. That's what Diane thought of me. That's what 33 years of marriage reduced to in a single journal entry. A man who builds invisible systems that nobody appreciates because they work. The stormwater doesn't flood because I designed the system. The streets don't wash away because I calculated the flow rates. And the marriage didn't fail because I wasn't paying attention. It failed because my wife confused reliability with boredom and chose chaos over competence. The divorce trial lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. The videographer's footage was played for the court. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of hallway video that the judge watched without expression, the way judges learn to watch things that would make ordinary people vomit. The hotel records were entered as exhibits. The phone records were entered. The joint bank account statements were entered. Karen Boyle testified about her investigation, the methodology, the findings, the apartment searches in Charlotte. Diane testified. She was asked about the joint bank account. It was for emergencies. Graham and I opened it as a contingency for what Mrs. Harmon, in case we needed to transition. Transition. You mean leave your respective spouses and move to Charlotte together? It wasn't that definite. You searched for apartments in South Park and Dilworth. You visited 3 properties. You saved listings on your phone. How definite does it need to be? The equitable distribution ruling was decisive. Under North Carolina's equitable distribution statute, the court has discretion to divide marital property unequally when one spouse's misconduct has depleted or wasted marital assets, or when the circumstances of the marriage make an equal division unjust. The judge awarded me 65% of the marital estate, the house, the investment accounts, and the retirement funds, and awarded Diane 35%. The $62,000 I'd spent on the wedding was classified as a marital waste, which further shifted the distribution in my favor. Total marital estate won $8 million. My share won $17 million. Diane's share, $30,000. The alienation of affection suit against Graham went to trial separately. The jury heard the same evidence, the footage, the hotel records, the bank account, the phone records, the journal entries. Graham's attorney argued that the affair was consensual between 2 adults, and that Graham bore no special duty to preserve my marriage. Paul Lindsay's closing argument was 4 sentences. Graham Whitfield met his future mother. In-law at a family dinner. He looked across the table at a married woman and decided he wanted her. He pursued her for 2 years while simultaneously pursuing her daughter. And on the day he married the daughter, he kissed the mother in a hallway and whispered, "He doesn't know." The jury knows now. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. The verdict won: $2 million in compensatory damages and $800,000 in punitive damages. Total $2 million. Payable by Graham Whitfield to Arthur Harmon, $2,000 million. From the man who'd stood at the altar and said, "I do," to my daughter while conducting a 2-year affair with my wife. The man who'd expensed 47 hotel visits to his corporate credit card. The man who'd opened a joint bank account with my wife and searched for apartments in Charlotte. The man who'd whispered, "Doesn't know," in a hallway while a Sony FX3 recorded every frame. Graham's employer, the wealth management firm, fired him 3 days after the verdict. The corporate credit card fraud, $21,150 in hotel charges billed as business expenses, triggered an internal audit that uncovered additional expense report irregularities totaling $38,000. The firm reported the findings to the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, which opened a disciplinary investigation. Graham's Series 7 and Series 66 licenses, the securities licenses required to work as a financial advisor, were suspended pending the investigation. His career in wealth management was over. The man who'd spent 10 years managing other people's money had lost his ability to manage anything, including himself. Emma's annulment was granted in December 2024. The court found that Graham's concealment of the affair constituted fraud sufficient to void the marriage. Under North Carolina law, an annulled marriage is treated as if it never existed, meaning Emma's legal status reverted to single, as though the ceremony at the Bradford had never happened. The wedding photographs are in a box in Emma's closet. She hasn't destroyed them. She hasn't opened the box either. She told me once that she keeps them because throwing them away would mean acknowledging that the day happened, and she's not ready for that yet. I understand. Some boxes aren't meant to be opened. Some doors aren't meant to be walked through again. Jesse Caldwell, the videographer, waived his remaining fee. He told me he felt responsible for the destruction that followed his phone call. I told him he wasn't responsible. He was the only honest person in the building that day. He saw something wrong and he said something. That's not destruction, that's integrity. I paid him anyway. The full $4,800. And I gave him a bottle of whiskey. Blanton's single barrel, the bourbon with the horse and jockey on the stopper. I don't know if Jesse drinks bourbon, but a man who makes a phone call like that deserves something that's been aging longer than the secret he uncovered. Diane moved to a townhouse in Durham. We don't speak. We communicate through attorneys about the final property distributions. She called me once 3 weeks after the verdict and said, "Arthur, I'm sorry." I said, "Which part?" She hung up. Graham paid the $2 million judgment through a structured settlement, $400,000 immediately, the remainder over 5 years at 6% interest. The first payment arrived on January 15, 2025. I deposited it in an account I'd set up for Emma, a trust fund to replace the wedding fund I'd spent $62,000 from. Not because Emma asked. Because fathers rebuild the things that get broken, even when the breaking wasn't their fault. Emma is in therapy twice a week, with a psychologist who specializes in betrayal trauma, a clinical framework developed by Dr. Jennifer Freyd at the University of Oregon that describes the specific psychological harm caused when the betrayal comes from someone the victim depends on for trust and safety. A husband betraying his wife is devastating. A husband and a mother betraying a daughter simultaneously is a category of harm that most people never have to imagine, and that Emma now lives with every day. She's getting better. Slowly. The way stormwater recedes after a flood. Not all at once, but inch by inch, as the systems that were overwhelmed begin to function again. Today, I'm sitting in the kitchen where Jesse Caldwell's phone call found me 6 months ago. The coffee is fresh. The laptop is closed. The house is quiet in the particular way that houses are quiet, when the person who used to fill them has left and the silence hasn't yet become normal. I think about the videographer sometimes. About the moment he was editing footage. Probably at his desk, probably late at night, probably with headphones on and a timeline scrolling across his screen, and he saw two people in a hallway. He could have edited it out, cut the frame, deleted the file, delivered the wedding package to Emma with a smile and a USB drive, and let the secret stay buried in the background of a 4-hour recording. He didn't. He picked up the phone. He called a man he'd met once, at a wedding, and he said the hardest words a stranger can say. "I found something you need to see. Jesse Caldwell is the reason I know the truth. Not because he wanted to destroy a family. Because he believed that the truth, even the ugly truth, even the truth that hides in hallways and whispers, he doesn't know, is better than the lie it replaces." I'm Arthur Harmon. I'm 61 years old. A videographer called me and said he'd noticed something very disturbing in the wedding videos. What he noticed was a 2-minute hallway recording that exposed a 2-year affair between my wife and my son-in-law. What I found when I started investigating was worse. Hotel records, a joint bank account, apartment searches, and a journal entry that described me as pipe in a culvert and a drainage report. I am a pipe in a culvert and a drainage report. I build the systems that keep the water from flooding. I design the infrastructure that nobody sees until it fails. And when my own infrastructure failed, when the marriage cracked and the trust eroded and the water came pouring through, I did what engineers do. I assessed the damage, I documented the failure, and I rebuilt. If this story touched you, leave a comment. Tell me, would you have watched the footage, or would you have told Jesse to delete it? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about family, truth, and the things hidden in the background of the lives we think we know. Before we close, this story, like all stories on this channel, contains fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, that's completely okay. Take care of yourselves, but if you stayed until the end, thank you. Jesse Caldwell would have liked you. He always said the camera doesn't lie. It just records what people think nobody's watching.